I now give the floor to His Excellency Albert Shingiro, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Development Cooperation of Burundi.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, Excellencies, ministers, dear colleagues, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. It is a great honor and a privilege for me to address this august assembly on behalf of the President, His Excellency Evariste Ndayishimiye, President of the Republic of Burundi. He wasn't able to be with you this morning, and he entrusted me with the task of representing him here to bring to you the voice and position of Burundi regarding the global challenges facing today's world. Allow me now, Mr. President, to convey to you my warm congratulations on your brilliant election to the presidency of this session. Your wisdom, Mr. President, your long and rich political and diplomatic career, your qualities as a keen listener, and your experience as a seasoned negotiator are, for us, all things that will guarantee the success of this session. You can always count on the full support and cooperation of Burundi as you discharge your mandate, Mr. President. Mr. President, your predecessor, Ambassador Denis Francis, deserves just as much admiration and recognition because he discharged his mandate with devotion, skill, and brilliance during the session that we have just closed. Allow me also, Mr. President, to pay equally deserved tribute to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, for his service to humankind, service rendered through his courageous action, still underway to make the United Nations an organization close to the peoples of the world despite the complex global arena in which the organization works. Mr. President, the theme chosen for this session, namely leaving no one behind, acting together for the advancement of peace, sustainable development and human dignity for present and future generations, is particularly fitting given that today's world is hurtling full throttle towards fragmentation, and we're seeing values of peace, solidarity and mutual comprehension being called into question. This fragmentation seems to go hand in hand with a new form of radicalization, which is drawing member states further and further away from reaching an understanding about how to address the global challenges facing us in a spirit of compromise and mutual trust. Today, more than ever before, Mr. President, it would seem that the majority of us act as if we were alone in this world. We act as if others did not exist or did not count. Solidarity has become a rare commodity at the very moment where we need it the most. Positive values are being eroded throughout the world, and yet we know that all conflicts, be these direct or proxy conflicts that the world has experienced, are born of the same seed. That is the denial of others, others' interests, whether those interests, that identity, be cultural, religious, or civilizational. In other words, all conflicts arise from the loss of trust, geopolitical jostling, and deliberate misinformation. All of these polarize countries and paralyze societies in a situation which is increasingly worrying. As is only right and proper, Mr. President, my country staunchly condemns all of those who wish to impose their points of view, their practices, or their values or schools of thought upon others, using the diplomacy of might is right, We condemn all of those who attach political conditions to development aid, whilst at the same time, Mr. President, forgetting that the world is multipolar, that difference in diversity is a driving force for development, economic growth, and the very thriving of our societies. If embraced as the asset that it is, diversity in all its dimensions is a mine of opportunity, possibilities, and a source of great inspiration. Many points of view, in all their richness, experiences, and practices, create a wealth of ideas, knowledge, understanding, and tools to accept the other. All of these can significantly increase a society's ability to prosper, to understand the various points of view in today's world, and allow us to consequently live in peace and in harmony with our environment, be this our immediate neighbourhood or further afield. As you know, Mr. President, cultural diversity and the diversity of values are a powerful lever to create ties that are stronger than our differences. Cultural diversity brings people together and as such supports social cohesion, peace, security, and peaceful coexistence. Despite its unifying power, the unifying power of culture, the last 20 years have been marked by a growing instrumentalization of culture and values in order to sow tension and division. Precisely because it is so heavy with meaning and intrinsically bound to people themselves, cultural diversity and the values which we hold dear have increasingly been placed on the front line of conflicts and used as a tool of division, even a weapon of war, used first and foremost, Mr. President, to subjugate weakened societies, particularly in the most fragile regions of our world. This narcissistic exploitation of culture and values has contributed to extending crises and conflicts, but it's also led to human rights being eroded, namely economic, social, and cultural rights. Today, more than ever before, narrowing the divide between cultures, values, and civilizations is urgent and necessary in order to establish peace, stability, solidarity, and allow inclusive development which leaves no one behind. Mr. President, the world that we live in today needs now more than ever before a consensus-based approach to major challenges such as the conflicts which continue to rage, natural disasters, climate change which is worsening, poverty and inequality which are omnipresent, mistrust and discord which are dividing the world. Our spirit of compromise is fading, international solidarity is losing momentum, and of course there are the Sustainable Development Goals which are very far indeed from being achieved. In terms of its role in building a better future and a global order based on the rule of law, a peaceful, equitable, prosperous and solidarity-based world, Burundi, my country, continues to pursue its ambition of building relations of friendship and cooperation based on the principle of sovereign equality and the principle of mutual trust. Our goal is to make Burundi a country that is a friend of all and an enemy of no one. Mr. President, Burundi is a true advocate of multilateralism, a multilateralism in which all countries, whatever their size, level of development, have a role to play in addressing the challenges of our time. You yourself, Mr. President, and our Secretary General already said as much, quite rightly indeed. In this regard, Burundi opposes unilateral measures imposed by certain stakeholders. These measures can unravel and destroy social fabric in the countries and societies targeted. Turning now to the implementation of UN Agenda 2030, Mr. President, if nothing is done to reverse current trends, we are slowly heading towards a situation where we fail to uphold the promise that we made to humankind in 2015 in this very same hall. We stand only 6 years from our deadline. The Secretary-General's report on the SDGs and their achievement clearly demonstrates that only 17 to 18% of the SDGs are on track to be achieved. Almost half have seen only scant or moderate progress. More than a third have seen no progress at all, or progress has even been undone. In the face of such an alarming situation, we the people have no time to waste. We need to act together and quickly to save future generations who will judge us by our actions or by our inaction as appropriate. Mr. President, it is crucial that the international community step up efforts to address the various challenges and meet the needs that exist, with particular effort being made to assist countries in special situations such as LDCs, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states. The goal here should be to reverse current trends and leave no one behind, as we collectively agreed to do in 2015 through the UN Agenda 2030. Mr. President, nationally, Burundi, like all other nations, is working night and day to significantly improve its people's quality of life. The people of Burundi firmly believe that the only path towards genuine political independence involves economic independence. And to achieve that, Mr. President, the government of Burundi, under the leadership of the President of the Republic, has implemented an ambitious vision, but a feasible one. That vision looks to make Burundi an emerging country in 2040 and a developed country in 2060. The goal sought in the reference document of our President here is to build a nation where its population enjoys full well-being. Our goal is to see a sustained continuation of production and structural changes leading to longer life expectancy and the meeting of fundamental needs. We're also looking through this document to reduce unemployment and poverty in all its forms and manifestations. By 2040, Mr. President, Burundi intends to stand as a country of peace, a country in which everyone lives in decent conditions, where no one dies from preventable diseases. We will be a competitive economy driven by the agro-food sector, and our industry, which will be high in added value, will also be driven by mining for the benefit of our people. And all of this will be done whilst protecting our natural environment and by paying due attention to equity and gender balance. Burundi will always stand on the side of solutions, and we reiterate our commitment to the peaceful resolution of disputes throughout the world, using tools which preventive diplomacy makes available to us, namely dialogue, cooperation, joint work, and negotiation. You are, of course, aware, Mr. President, distinguished delegates, that no developing country, or rather, says the Speaker, no development is possible without development, and peace cannot be possible without development. Peace without development is a mere pipe dream. Peace and development are two sides of the same coin. The terrorist threat, Mr. President, and the dangers linked to violent extremism have increased greatly in number in recent years, and this is having an ever more bitter impact at a local, regional, and international level. In the face of this existential threat, Burundi has committed to continuing and strengthening its cooperation with other nations to prevent and combat terrorism and violent extremism. We're doing this by making a substantial contribution to peace operations and counter-terrorism operations, namely in Somalia, Central Africa, and in the east of the DRC. Our goal is to support these three brotherly countries in their legitimate efforts to restore state authority across the full extent of their territory. Mr. President, the climate crisis is pummeling our planet before our very eyes, and sustainable solutions are taking their time because of a lack of financing and climate action in order to help the countries of the global south to face this three-pronged planetary crisis, namely climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. Burundi, like all other nations in the sub-region, is increasingly affected by climate change, despite the fact it contributes only minimally to global greenhouse gas emissions. The frequency of adverse climate phenomena such as floods, landslides, droughts, the rising levels of Lake Tanganyika are all demonstrations of how we're facing climate change. These events are affecting agricultural cycles, causing harvest loss, food insecurity, and the erosion of local ecosystems. We're calling for quicker progress to be made to allow countries gravely affected to receive green financing to limit the adverse effects of climate change on the implementation of the SDGs. Mr. President, in order to do its part to stop climate change, Burundi, like other nations that signed the Paris Agreement, made a commitment through its nationally determined contributions document. A commitment to incorporate environmental protection, building resilience to climate change and food security into national policies and the vision of Burundi as an emerging country in 2040 and a developed country in 2060. As you are aware, Mr. President, climate change do not only have an impact on our physical environment, it also affects the health of our people. With that in mind, Mr. President, Burundi has established healthcare measures and public health measures and incorporated these into our climate change mitigation plan. And we beat the record set in the recent report of the Global Alliance for Climate Change, because we're now at the top of the list in terms of countries that have given the most attention to their population's health in their mitigation plans. Mr. President, several initiatives to protect and restore landscapes have also been taken, namely a far-reaching national reforestation program called Ewu Burundi Arambaye, or Covered Burundi in French. This plan looks to promote agroforestry and the tracing of forest cover, and this plan seeks to involve all sectors of society. I'd like now to look at human rights, one of the challenges to be addressed. For Burundi, dignity, as referred to in the theme of this session, begins by promoting and protecting human rights. These are universal, indivisible, interdependent, and inextricably linked. My country, Burundi, firmly believes that human rights must be strengthened and fully incorporate the fundamental principles of universality, transparency, impartiality, non-selectivity, non-politicization, and objectivity, as well as the rejection of two standards as a principle. Special mechanisms sometimes imposed to deal with geopolitical tensions in certain areas of the world must be sacrificed in favor of dialogue and cooperation. And in this connection, Burundi must be given fair treatment within the Human Rights Council in Geneva. We call upon certain stakeholders to avoid continually clobbering us with special mechanisms that are political in nature and have no added value in terms of ensuring the enjoyment of human rights in all of their facets. Here, I encourage those who champion such projects, they know who I'm talking about, I ask them to withdraw the initiative to extend the mandate of the so-called Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in Burundi. That project should not be renewed. The mandate should not be renewed because the attitude of this mechanism creates useless tensions and avoidable tensions, and those that initiate these projects are politically motivated, cynical, and immoral. International migration is a global reality, a phenomenon that has existed since the dawn of our planet. Our country, our communities, migrants and families are affected unpredictably and all in different ways. Burundi recognizes a need for a holistic approach to human mobility. There needs to be strengthened cooperation at a bilateral, regional and global level in order to facilitate safe, orderly and regular migration. Nationally, Mr. President, Burundi is currently in the process of signing cooperation agreements with countries of destination for labour migration. This cooperation-based approach aims to ensure legal, social and human rights protection for migrant workers, and it also aims to significantly curb human trafficking. Mr. President, the issue of multilateralism has received particular attention since the very beginning of this session. After 79 years of existence, of the United Nations, the overriding conclusion is that in spite of its limits, of which the world is well aware, the multilateralism has served to significantly improve global problems. The most recent evidence that multilateralism is not dead and buried was the adoption by consensus in this very hall on the 22nd of September of our Pact for the Future and its annexes. This is a concise and action-oriented document. However, Mr. President, despite this encouraging result, there are signs that portend the gradual weakening of our spirit of compromise. There are harbingers of indifference when it comes to collective rules. In an increasingly globalized world where we're increasingly interdependent, no state, however powerful that state might be, can alone hope to address the challenges it faces. States must strengthen mutual commitment, must adopt a coordinated approach based on fair rules of the game to avoid unilateral actions which, as you are aware, take the form of clear interference in the domestic affairs of other countries in clear violation of the principles and values of the UN Charter. Mr. President, I wish to turn now to Security Council reform. Negotiations on this matter have finally become more flexible. We're seeing movement. Through me, Burundi reaffirms its commitment to the Common African position reflected in the Esselwini Consensus. Mr. President, we will never be able to hammer home enough the following fact. The multilateral system is demonstrating that its capacity is limited to effectively guarantee proper global governance. Notable injustice, unprecedented injustice is being done to Africa. It's the only continent absent from the Security Council among the permanent members, and we are underrepresented among the elected members. That injustice must stop now. The desire to perpetuate the exclusion, Mr. President, of more than 1,200,000,000 inhabitants from the table around which we take our major decisions is quite simply unacceptable. Mr. President, universal, equitable, and affordable access to information as well as to information infrastructure is also one of the major challenges of our age. The Internet can be a tool to bring peoples and spaces together, and that's why it was designed. However, the spider web, as we seem to call it, prioritizes rich countries, whilst at the same time developing countries have low levels of internet connectivity. This is particularly true in Africa. Today in our world, our trade and our exchanges are becoming increasingly digital, Mr. President, and as such it's vital that all countries have access to internet, including AI, that is revolutionizing our world. There is a growing gaping gap between the countries of the global north and the global south, and that's meaning that many people in the global south are losing out on social, scientific, and economic opportunities. Leaving no one behind is one of the pillars of the UN actions. And so, as a matter of absolute urgency, this digital gap must be closed in the interests of current and future generations. Mr. President, I would be remiss if I did not inform this august assembly and that our country is committed to implementing the theme of our assembly, that is unity in diversity, to bring communities to a state of peace, sustainable development, and ensuring that everyone can enjoy human dignity. That is our commitment. I thank you.
Muchas gracias al ministro.
My thanks go to the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation.